Should the Baltimore Ravens trade for a star wide receiver? We talk about that and more with a very special guest next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we've returned here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. Of course, we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. Here, back again with a Purple Friday edition episode, and that means our Purple Friday guest is here once again, former Baltimore Raven, Super Bowl champion, Qadry Ismail. Q. The draft is coming up just 3 weeks away. It's exciting. The Ravens have 10 draft picks, 9 in the first 4 rounds. How you doing today?
Wow. I mean, you blink, Super Bowl is over with. The silliness of the offseason, combines, Senior Bowl, All-Star games, pro days, and now we're talking about the offseason champions trying to make another push for it when it comes to the Cleveland Browns yet again. Trying to claim that, hey, we're going to draft away and we're just going to be amazing. We're going to see what they do. We don't believe they're going to be champions in the regular season, but we'll give them their offseason. Meanwhile, yes, you're right. 10 draft picks. It'll be interesting to see what the Ravens do. Eric DeCosta and Joe Ortiz, and obviously John Harbaugh was able to talk to the media for their pre-draft luncheon, if you will, and a whole lot of nothing. So let's talk about the draft. Let's talk about who's going to be where, and realize come draft day, it'll mean nothing.
Yeah, you got to take what's said in those luncheons with a little grain of salt. You know, teams aren't going to give away their whole battle plans before the draft, but I think there were a couple really nice things that all those guys had to say that I think were a little bit of truths, but for the most part, you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt. But Q, speaking of where guys are, let's start off in the secondary before we talk about wide receivers in the draft in the second and third segments. Chris Westry, who I think a lot of people kind of almost expected back even after the Ravens didn't tender him, goes and signs with the Carolina Panthers. And this marks yet another departure in the depth of their secondary, with Anthony Averett going to Las Vegas, Tavon Young being cut, Jimmy Smith still a free agent out there. So right now it's really Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters, and you don't have a whole lot else there. Eric DeCosta did say that they like to go into a season with a lot of depth at cornerback. Right now they do not have that depth. So Q, how would you address this need now at cornerback, which has suddenly shot up into probably the top 2 of their needs? Would it be signing a veteran and drafting 2 guys, maybe drafting guys, signing 2 veterans? Where would you go there?
You know they're going to get veterans. I mean, the Ravens historically have tried to shore up that corner position. I think the one year when they traded for Marcus Peters, and then obviously they had Marlon Humphreys, that's where you saw the aggressiveness of the Ravens, typical fashion. You saw even when they went and got Jimmy Smith in the first round, they still got some veteran guys. The likes of Dominique Foxworth comes to mind, people like that. So when you know that your team in this league, it's all about defending the pass, you need depth at corner. I thought last year it really showed that the corner situation was a weakness. Even if you didn't have pass rushers, you had pressure on the quarterback. But technique-wise, mother of pearl, there were some big separation gaps when it came to completing balls to receivers down the field, and you just can't have that. Contested catches are the name of the game, and force the receiver to make a Moss-like catch over you, or force the receiver to really concentrate and go down and make a play. Otherwise, that ball should be incomplete or intercepted, and it just didn't happen. So I think draft-wise, sure, if there's talent out there, it seems to be, get it. But I think the priority in that first 2 rounds is absolutely and I know they're going to talk board, and you stick with the board. And basically, for those who don't know and don't want to dumb it down, but simply, the Ravens, and all teams do, but the Ravens do a really good job of identifying who they feel are the 200 or 150 minimum best players in the draft, or could be draftable. With that said, they rank them, and now they feel like they've done their due diligence. They feel like just on the field, off the field, everything. This guy fits what happens if, in fact, we're in a position where he's on the board and he's one of our top 25 players, and oh my, other teams didn't pick him, and all the other picks that we had placed on our board is gone. Then we're going to get him, whoever that him is, and so it could be a defensive back. But my point is saying, man, go ahead and do what you need to do when it comes to corner, and let that be kind of later round. Let defensive end, let D-line dictate and rule your first few picks of the draft.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this draft class is so deep cornerback-wise, and in other positions too, but it is so deep cornerback-wise where you don't have to force a pick in the first round if there is not one there for, like, if Derek Stingley is not available, Sauce Gardner, they don't have to force that 14th pick to be a cornerback. There are edge guys. There are defensive linemen who could be that selection. Then in the second round, you go and get another corner. But Q, in my opinion, I don't think the Ravens should necessarily sign a star and draft a star at cornerback. Not both. I think it should be one or the other in terms of, I'm personally like not signing Stephon Gilmore and drafting Sauce Gardner in the first round. That'd be great. Like that'd make the Ravens secondary pretty much unstoppable, but I think there are just too many needs for them to do that right now. I think they need to spread it out a little bit. So I'm going to pose this question to you, Q. Would you rather have the Ravens sign Stephon Gilmore, like a star cornerback, or maybe draft that really star cornerback in the first round, such as a Sauce Gardner or a Derek Stingley?
Yeah, so there is the known, obviously, with Stephon Gilmore, but then there is also the known of the business side. It's going to cost you. The unknown is you don't have a known cap scenario with regards to your quarterback situation, because Lamar is being very shrewd and putting himself in great position to have a huge payday. With that said, you go ahead and you draft a rookie. Now you got some years where you can have some wiggle room, develop the guy, be under the rookie, contract and its structure and what it would mean to your cap. That's kind of what I see when it comes to the thoughts of the Ravens. That's just what they do. They know that, here's what we're going to spend. Here's how we're going to go about it. We're, going to be frugal and yet at the same time be aggressive when it needs to be aggressive. If we need to trade, we need to trade. But, the idea of I think some Raven fans feel like there's this open checkbook and you just need to spend your way to a championship, when the reality is you gotta be smart and you can't put yourself in salary cap hell. But then also you can't be the Bengals either. And what I mean by that is, obviously the Bengals went to the Super Bowl last year. Sure, they had some success with Marvin Lewis in his tenure as head coach going to the playoffs, but they were always knocked out. But the way in which they go about evaluating talent and, not really having a true scouting department and really good staff, they would leave it up to the coaches and just be, not first rate about it. That's one thing. That's cheap. But I think, for the Ravens, they're trying to be smart, build, recognize, what talent is. And again, I mean, how many times you and I we talked about, just the roster turnover. I mean, I don't want to be in a position where I have to give away good players because I can't afford them. I want to be able to keep the guys that have, truly proven that with them on our team, we have a better chance to win. And I think at the end of the day, that mantra has served the Ravens well.
It absolutely has. And I think when we talk about premium positions, there are a lot of them in this league. Quarterback, offensive line, corner is becoming one of those now, and it has been now for a couple of years, because you see all these top flight corners getting $100 million contracts. Stephon Gilmore might not get that $100 million contract, but he's going to make a fair amount of average annual value there, whether it be around 10, 14 million, whatever it might be. I think Spelltrack has him at like 14.1, something around there. So it's either you can sign that star player or you can sign a couple quality vets, draft one of the first round corners, but do they even get to you? So there's a lot that goes into it. But I'd personally probably rather have a Sauce Gardner or Derek Stingley at this point, but you just never know how that draft board is going to fall. But Q, in the safety room now, the Ravens, they did have Geno Stone sign his exclusive rights tender, his free agent tender there. So he is back, and the Ravens have a ton of depth at that position now, such as the newest signing of Marcus Williams. You have Tony Jefferson, who was brought back. You can't forget about Chuck Clark, wild cards, such as Brandon Stevens or Darius Washington. Do you feel like the Stone signing or re-signing puts kind of like a lid on the safety position for now, where the Ravens, they have enough depth where they don't have to maybe sign a veteran or draft a guy, or do you still feel like there's more additions to be made there?
No. You've done your job. That's good. We just hope that Williams, Clark, all those guys, Jefferson, they show up. We'll see what Washington brings to the table. We'll see what these guys bring to the table. But right now, I like where that part of the roster is at. And this is the first time since probably going back to Eric Weddle where I felt like, all right, I see what you guys did there, and it feels pretty good.
Yeah, it's like a tale of two parts of the secondary where the cornerback needs like all this renovation, all this addition, and then the safety room is just kind of chilling there. And you're like, all right, well, we have our guys now. Let's go see what they can do. They have a lot of different depth there, a lot of different talent. So I agree. I think they can kind of settle there, focus more on corner and other needs for sure. We'll head into our first break here now, though. When we get back, we'll be diving into the wide receiver position. So be sure to stay tuned for that. But first, let me tell you about Bet Online, and we can finally stop talking about Gonzaga and Illinois. It's over. Kansas is the champion. I picked Gonzaga and Illinois in the finals. They're done. We can focus now, though, on the NBA, NHL, MLB starting up. So a ton of options at betonline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. They have a lot of different experts to help you out with anything you might need. So if you're betting on Nikola Jokic MVP odds, or anything relating to the NBA, NHL, or any other major sports, BetOnline.net has you covered. And you can do a lot with the live Vegas casino games they have to offer. They have just everything you need. So it has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Qadry Ismail. And Q, let's talk about your former position a little bit in the wide receiver room. Now, We're talking about a market that is booming right now in terms of contracts. Guys getting $15 million a year, $20 million a year, $25 million per season. And it does beg the question of just where this leaves the Ravens in the market, because they have two very, I guess you can say, the first round picks they have spent on Marquise Brown or Rashad Bateman, two very young, talented players there, but it doesn't just stop there. They have Devin Duvernay and James Prochet and Tylan Wallace, etc. But there have been the questions of whether the Ravens should trade for a star. I know we talked about that a couple weeks ago. I want to narrow it down, though. There have been rumors about DK Metcalf. There have been rumors about a bunch of other different young wide receivers. Do you feel like it is worth it for the Ravens to give up that draft capital for a younger wide receiver, maybe on the last year of his rookie contract? But then it does beg the question of what does the contract that he signed look like on top of what Marquise Brown could get?
No. You have young guys who really have stepped up, shown that they can make plays. I think they want to get more opportunities and chances to make plays. John Harbaugh has hinted towards the idea of keeping the young guys hungry and giving them, chances to prove themselves. The shiny new toy, sometimes when you get it, you realize that it only works with a certain battery. And I think DK Metcalf might be one of those guys. I don't doubt his talent. Dude is crazy productive, scored an awful lot of touchdowns, played extremely well with a really strong quarterback. From all that I've heard, he's a good locker room guy. But I think the chemistry within the Ravens locker room right now, and, you see the reports of Bateman and Lamar running routes and throwing the ball down the field. I think those are some good signs, and you see chemistry wanting to be developed. So I think the big picture is Just I'm not gonna say maintain the course, but develop the course, develop the guys, keep this receiving core hungry, but also recognize that it's time to eat. They deserve to sit at the table and not be waiting on seconds because you are looking at somebody else and bringing them in to eat. When it comes to drafting, maybe you go to camp with some guys that could be undrafted rookie free agents, maybe a late round pick, but I think overall you should be thinking more about defense. I think that if there's a running back that comes along that is on your board and you have them really highly rated because of the injury situation, Gus and JK, get him. Get the guy, draft him, because you never know. Running back is a fickle situation, but I think from a receiver standpoint, this is good. This is a solid group of receivers, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for them.
Yeah, and I think also when you look at the position, I know we talked about this, but the Ravens right now, is their offense stands, they have been primarily, when they are completely healthy, a more run-heavy offense. That in 2019, 2020, they had the least amount of pass attempts. But that's not saying the Ravens can't throw the ball. I thought their pass offense the first half of the season last year looked pretty good and looked really improved. But for a team that I think utilizes wide receivers maybe a little bit less than another team, to send off a first-rounder or a second-rounder or multiple picks, plus if you're talking about Metcalf having to sign that guy to a $20 million per year extension on top of Marquise Brown, which he'll also be making a lot of money, it feels like I agree with the fact that, look, no one's arguing that DK Metcalf isn't better than Tyler Wallace right now, right? DK Metcalf's a phenomenal player, but I think I agree in the fact that, look at a corner or a defensive lineman, an edge rusher. Those are the types of players that I would trade for right now instead of that, young wide receiver. But it all depends on what happens with Marquise Brown there and whether the Ravens decide to re-sign him or not. Eric DeCosta making it pretty clear they're going to pick up that fifth-year option. The Ravens have said that before. But
it's $13 million, correct?
I think it's around $13 million. So you have that.
No, you ain't worried about 28 to 20 million. 18 million. It's 13. It's good. Sign the dude. Let's roll.
Exactly. And when looking at what comes after that fifth-year option, Q, obviously the extension comes into play. Would you feel comfortable giving Marquise Brown what some of these younger wide receivers are making right now, what we've seen some of these guys sign for, and what players are probably going to make with the salary cap going up? You have guys looking at $20 million per year contracts after their fifth-year option, especially if you're Marquise Brown. How would you go about that situation after the fifth-year option right now?
So Marquise Brown, you can definitely be creative with, whether it be off season or whether it be like right up to the season start. You can put it to you this way. If you're in a position where you feel like Marquise is really looking good, he's solid, he's strong, in through the off season, lock him up. Go ahead, you can thin it out as far as the cap is concerned. Give him a healthy signing bonus and let's roll. If you don't, sign to your fifth-year option, let him play it out, and then in your mind you got to feel like there's some other guys that are going to be potentially out there, whatever that might be, and you got another first rounder and Bateman on your roster, and no worries. I think ultimately a deal can get done. Right now, we know salary cap wise and the money that's being thrown around with these other high level receivers, you can sign them to that fifth-year option.
Yeah, for right now, Baltimore's in a fine spot because you're right, $13 million for next year is not going to break the bank for them. It's what comes after that, which is like, all right, how is this going to work? And also, we've seen the Ravens with their own guys try to get extensions done before they hit the free agent market. So this isn't anything new where, it's like the opposite of what happened with Bradley Bozeman, where Baltimore, apparently came to him with an extension. Bozeman said no, and then it seemed like that was that, but they've sign guys like Chuck Clark, Nick Boyle, Tavon Young, Patrick Ricard. So while Marquise Brown would probably get a little bit more money than those guys got on their contracts, the Ravens could come to him and say, hey, look, we want to get you signed for the long term here. Let's see what we can get done. So it might be more of a team-friendly deal as opposed to when you would hit free agency, and then other teams might be vying for his services, and then all that different stuff happens there. So it's interesting to think about all the different nuances that can go into signing a contract and even just the timing of when it can all happen. But Q, we talked about signing or trading for a star veteran wide receiver, but what about signing one? Potentially a Jarvis Landry, Julio Jones, for example. This is a team that, again, it seems like they want their young guys to play. So where would a veteran fit in at this point? It feels like they could just draft a guy and be done with it, and that's that, and they're moving forward. But do you see a fit for maybe not a star trade for a wide receiver, maybe a star signing at that position?
I think the big thing you look at is the price is right. At the same time, when would you consider signing him? Who else is out there that is wooing him over? If there's no one out there wooing him, you have time to wait. How are we looking in camp? Are our guys balling out? Do we feel comfortable with the guys that we have in the room? Is there a need to kind of go out there? I think that's kind of how it is in the league. You have your eye on those guys, but if you need them, we need to figure this out. If we don't need them, not that I'm saying we don't need to figure it out, but all right, let's keep it on the back burner. Hey, Duvernay, man, you saw how he was really doing great in that blitz period. Oh, that was tremendous. Boy, he is coming down with a lot of contested catches. Wow, I know Rashad Bateman. Oh my goodness, our red zone, man, we are crushing it. Like I think there's some good things that we can do. From a tight end standpoint, man, I like who we got, but we need more. All right, let's go ahead on out there. Now, if you went ahead and got a receiver, and now all of a sudden you need a tight end, now what are you going to do? So I think the main thing is there's a fine line of, all right, let's examine who we need to examine, see who's out there. If the price fits, 1, 2, then becomes how are we looking? So let's sit tight and then just kind of go along. And then if a decision needs to be made, let's have that conversation.
Yeah, I agree. You don't want to necessarily overspend here because the Ravens do have so much talent. But if there's a wide receiver, I wouldn't expect anything right now. But if there's a wide receiver in June or July who's still looking for a job and the Ravens have an opening and they want to see what this guy can bring, if it is Landry or Julio Jones, I expect both of those guys will probably be gone by that point. But if they're not, I think they could be fits where you can take a low-risk deal on them, where you're not going to break the bank and necessarily it doesn't siphon up all your cap space. You can still focus on other needs. And we've seen the Ravens let this market play out to their advantage to where they can say, Justin Houston, come on in for $2 million when people expected him to get around 5, 6, 8 million per season. Right. It's exactly like those situations. So I think that Baltimore could stand to add a veteran, but at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to them just drafting a guy in the mid rounds or even in the earlier rounds and kind of just being done with it there, because this market, Q, it is booming for wide receivers right now. And so they'll have to adjust the Marquise Brown situation. But for me, I think a veteran would be completely okay, but it feels like the draft might be a bit more likely at this point. And we'll talk about the draft coming up in this final segment when we get back. We'll be diving into that, whether the Ravens could trade up or trade down. Be sure to stay tuned for that. But first, let me tell you a bit about Built Bar. And Built Bar has a ton of different flavors, and you can get in on those right now because people give up on their New Year's resolutions at this point in the year, but don't do it if yours is to eat healthy. Do it with Built Bar. They have a ton of great of those flavors like mint brownie, coconut almond, and they have a new thing called Built Bar Puffs, which are the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're really interesting. I highly recommend them personally. And Built Bar, they have all the macros you need, 130 calories. They are a bar that is not just good tasting, but also is good for your health. So if you want to learn more about Built Bars, be sure to go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCK15. Get 15% off of your next order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Qadry Ismail and Q. This draft is coming up, and it is coming up fast as we have the Ravens with those 10 draft picks, 9 in the first 4 rounds. And after the Patrick Ricard signing, we haven't really seen a ton of movement from the Ravens. Eric DeCosta, John Harbaugh, Joe Ortiz talking at the luncheon, as you put it, and said that it feels like for them, the draft will come and then they'll look at the free agent market afterwards. So we could not see any more moves until after the draft is completed. But Q, we talked about the Ravens' biggest needs in the draft kind of before free agency and during the first wave or so. But now that you've seen this market play out, you see where the Ravens are roster-wise, where are you investing early draft picks in this year's draft?
Early draft picks, I am just convinced that D-line has to be addressed. I'm convinced that pass rusher has to be addressed. Linebacker, no Bobby Wagner. Well, it has to be addressed. Did I say defense? Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about defense. Yeah, we saw what happened. Obviously, Wink Martindale is no longer on the squad. And Greg Roman has a get-out-of-jail-free card when it comes to his offense and what Steve Bisciotti said at the owners' meeting. So I would be trying to be McDonald and be like, yo, man, I'm loving the fact that I'm a young defensive coordinator, but give me some young guns out there. Let's draft some college dudes and put them into my system and let's roll. Let's make this thing happen. I think that's paramount to the Ravens' success this year. It's that ability to take it to the next level. And when I say take it to the next level, it's defensively, you got to get to the quarterback. There's no way Deshaun Watson and Joe Burrow are going to be just saying it's okay. You know, Mitch Trubisky, I think we'll see how much he learned from Josh Allen. But the main thing is, I think this entire crew and what they're all about, you can't take any of them for granted. You got to get to the quarterback, period.
Oh, absolutely. And I know the whole Zadarius Smith thing still kind of stings, but you got to find ways now. You got to pivot away from that. I feel like they have. And inside linebacker, you talked about that same thing. That's one of the reasons why I thought Bobby Wagner would have been a great fit, not just for his on-field play, but because I think that would have eliminated part of a need for the Ravens. But now they have to go into this draft with potentially another one where they might have to spend a high draft pick. But Q, speaking of high draft picks, the Ravens, they have number 14, one of the higher picks they've had in their franchise history. And I think that gives them an opportunity to do a lot of different things. And one of those things is maybe trade up into the top 10 if there's a falling star. I know Kayvon Thibodeau's been mentioned, Kyle Hamilton, some of those top flight talents that could fall due to certain reasons. Do you feel like this could be the year where the Ravens do make that move? And would you feel comfortable if they were to trade in a trade up, a maybe future first or future second round pick?
To trade up? No,
yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen. The draft will take on its form and its shape. I think there's plenty of skilled players that are going to be looked at. So I don't really think the Ravens, those first couple of picks, those guys, they're looking for a lot, like I said, a lot of skill-based guys. I don't really think that they need to necessarily worry. Maybe in previous drafts, but we've seen more than anything, people have jumped up and wanted to get a coveted player where the Ravens would be like, go ahead, jump up, get it. I could easily see them trading all the way down and getting fancy that way rather than trading up. I don't think they need to, based upon this year's draft, I don't think they really need to do any trading up.
Yeah, unless you have someone like a Thibodeau who falls to like the 8, 9, 10 range where you're not giving up a huge amount of capital to get them. Like, you would obviously have to give up some capital to go up there and get a player like that. But I'm not trading into like the top 3 or the top 5 or something. That would cost probably a little too much. And for the Ravens, I think it would maybe be a little more than they're willing to spend on a trade up anyway. But you're right. I mean, the Ravens, this draft class is so deep where they could trade back and still probably have like 2 to 5 players on their board that are available at 18, maybe that would have been a 14. So you have options for the Ravens. But Q, speaking of that, the Ravens, it seems like in the Costa era, Baltimore has coupled a trade back with a trade up in some circumstance. So they end up trading back, getting more draft picks, and then at some point acquiring an earlier draft pick. Would you feel more confident in this draft if the Ravens were to trade back and have more picks so that they would have more swings?
So if you have 10 already, one of the things that I thought was really cool and interesting was Bisciotti saying how he studied so hard and really, really is in the thick of it when it comes to, the potential of draft capital to be traded or to stay put. With that said, I just think that, when it comes down to it, he's a dude where if it makes sense to do it and he gives you his blessing, like I could see where they would, like just all right, we're loading up and we're gonna get a whole bunch of dudes, because of and potential future picks as well. Oh yeah, I could easily see that. Just the end season is a physical thinking man's game. The off season is a mental physical thinking man's game. Think about that. So what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, there are things you can control very much so when it comes to evaluation, feeling a guy out, the whole 9 yards. During the season, it's like, all right, I did all I can do. Now you got to go out there and do it. And so, yeah, the physical element of it all, the actual art of, being a pass rusher, slapping a guy's hand and getting around the edge, dipping your shoulder, bull rushing a guy, speed rushing a guy, changing it up, understanding certain circumstances on the field, all those things. Yeah, those are mentally challenging things, but there's also a physical element to it. So I think he really geeks out on this side of things where it's a physical, a mental side that, is the dominant side, if you will. Like, wow, okay, if we trade up for this guy, I think he would fit. Look at his measurables. Then you get into his physical element of it all. Then you look at the tape. But, yeah, that's how I think this whole draft will be approached.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if the Ravens ended with like 11 or 12 picks. Like, I think that's maybe the sweet spot for them if they want to load up. But they could potentially go about things and maybe have 9 at the end, or maybe even 8 if they want to make that trade up. But it feels like the Ravens, especially over the Lacosta era, have wanted those swings to make sure that they can hit on a couple of guys in the mid rounds and the late rounds, which is completely fine. And honestly, if there was a draft class to do it, I feel like this would be the one to load up because of the fact that it is so deep. You have a lot of guys coming out, a lot of deep positions, that position of need for the Ravens, so they could double down potentially. So at the end of the day, this is a draft where Baltimore will be able to get value in the mid rounds. I mean, they have 5 fourth-round draft picks right now. So the 4th round, they'll be scavenging around for that talent. They've had success there before. They like the mid-late round guys, small school guys. We've seen them go all over the country to find these players, and I think this will be another great draft. We'll just have to see how the board plays out. But Q, that's all I have for you today. Thanks so much for hopping on here once again. And when we get back next week, maybe there'll be a signing, but it almost seems like there won't be, and we'll have to look for the draft for the Ravens to make those major moves.
Appreciate you, brother. I am looking forward to next week, but I'm also looking forward to the back and forth that's going to be going on during the week to see what exactly is smoke and mirrors with the Cleveland Browns, the offseason champions.
The off-season paper champion Cleveland Browns. I'm excited to get to the season so we can stop talking about the off-season champions and get to the actual champions. Yes. Exactly. But that's all I have here today on Locked On Ravens. Thanks so much for tuning in. When we get back here on Monday, we'll have another mock draft Monday with a trade-up twist. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you on Monday.